screen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Stack Talk. So today we have Trey, who's going to do a presentation and demo of StackRox on operators. So uh, go on, Trey. Thanks for coming to the meeting.
Gotcha. It's nice. Thank you for having me. Let me share my screen. Are you guys able to see it?
Yes.
Gotcha. So today I'll be talking about StackRox. First things first, I will be going over what StackRox is and some of the key features of StackRox as well. And at the end of my presentation, I will show you what StackRox is like. You can ask questions as well throughout the meeting. That's completely fine. So in general, StackRox is a Kubernetes native security platform. It's designed to secure and manage and monitor your cluster through multiple means. The reason why I was assigned to this task was just due to the fact that I had a good bit of Linux system administration background, and I'm very interested in security as well. And I was brought upon to try to secure our open source cluster. Tried to secure open source clusters, and we found StackRox as a very suitable means. So in general, there are multiple components of StackRox. It's broken up into different pods, but for the most part, the three that you would be very prevalent to you would be the scanner, the sensor, and the collector. I mean, the scanner, the central pod, and the collector pod. So the central pod is, pretty much for, the home operation base. It takes in all data, it stores all the data, it processes the data as well. It's also used for, that's where the route is actually coming from, where you sign into StackRox to use this user interface, graphical user interface. The scanner is there to, on the actual node, to scan the images of the pods. And it checks for CVEs, and it sends that data to the central pod. And the collector is on each node just to collect other prevalent data sets as well, collect the health of the pod, health of the cluster, health of the node, and it just collects general overall and sends it to the central pod. So in general, my job for my internship is to, by the end of my internship is to deploy it onto the small cluster, just so that I can manage projects. I feel that it's a very good way to secure projects and to, have, I guess, a base criteria of set priorities, just so that you can even reference to, and also just provide people that are not as security savvy an easier way just to get up to speed to secure their environments. So in general, why do I feel like we need this? For the most part, security is hard to implement manually. Even unless you have someone that was dedicated to security, it's very troubling unless you have like some type of security engineer or someone that was very good with cloud-based security. It's very hard to implement. It's also very hard to mess up. It's easy to mess up even via with automation, using things such as Ansible and Puppet to manage your infrastructure, or in our case, using Kubernetes to manage our container environments, our cluster environments. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, it does leave holes in your security. Another thing that is brought upon ourselves is the fact that security data is also hard to track, record, and understand, just due to the fact that, yes, you may know that, for example, yes, you may be tracking, networking stuff to each individual container or pod, or any type of environment that you set up, but you don't really know what to look out for. The solution that I'm bringing upon ourselves is using StackRox to provide a graphical user interface that makes it easy to read, so that even someone with little security knowledge can know what's going on. You can read documentation, you look up several YouTube videos, and you can get up to speed on using StackRox. Another thing that I found very great about StackRox is the fact that it comes with a plethora of plugins by default to help manage the cluster itself. So why I chose it to input it into our infrastructure is just due to the fact that, at most we have security at the image layer when it's on our image repo. From what I've seen, it does some dependency checks, but afterwards it doesn't. Once you kind of pull it, there's no ongoing policy where you, update dependencies, where you check for dependencies at all. So there's no ongoing checks for that. You just would let it go. There's also we don't also have a default policy control procedure. And there's also, as I said before, there's no way to, monitor traffic from a security standpoint. Yes, you may know the fact that, some data may be going in and out, ingress data and ingress and ingress data, not data, but connections going in and out of your pod, but you don't really know what to look out for. And StackRox provides a way for you to have a visual representation to see what's going on. So a few things that I will be going over today is the fact that StackRox is, some things that it can do is it can manage your clusters via security policies. You can define your own, or you can use the predefined ones that comes with StackRox. One example of this is the fact that, it does policy checks for privilege escalations on the containers itself. So if something, if someone, logs into your container and, gets root access, it can check for that and it can send an alert. It also checks if a container is not updated for more than a certain period of time. And that's one of the policies that I will actually show you. There's also there's also a good number of ways to scope out the policies as well. So the fact that, you can make it so that this policy is for the entire cluster, or it could be as, big as the entire cluster, or it can also be as little as just a single namespace, which I'm also experimenting with as well. You can manage, you can also, it also helps the fact that if you don't know, how to, for the most part, secure a cluster, which for most admins and most, SREs in general, security is not your main job. It has a compliance checklist. One noticeable one is the CIS benchmarks for K8 and Docker that comes in-house with StackRox. So it pretty much scans your cluster and it goes through a checklist to see, hey, is it following these noticeable guidelines? Is these things set? Are there files and permissions that are not set, or are they more accessible than they should be? Another great thing is that it manages network policies, and it manages network policies, and it shows you a network graph, a actual graph to show ingress and ingress traffic throughout your pods. Another feature that I also liked about StackRox is the fact that there is numerous integrations, there's numerous plugins. A few ones that I saw is the fact that there's notify plugins. You can set up StackRox to send data to Slack, or if you have your own Splunk server, you can use that to send data to a Splunk server. It's kind of future-proof due to the fact that you may not have your Splunk server set up now, but if you want it, you can set it up very easily from what I've seen through the documentation. So as of right now, this is kind of a overview of what you would see on StackRox when you log in. But I'm actually going to give you guys a live demo just to showcase, and you can also ask questions as well instead of going through the presentation, because I have it live right now. There we go. I hope you guys can see it. So right now, this is the StackRox page that you will log into with the default credentials that you're given once you create the cluster. when you create the StackRox environment. When you create the StackRox environment, it actually auto generates you a password, so it's decently secure unless you give out all your password everywhere. From here, you can see some noticeable things. For example, you can see the fact that I have this set on one cluster. It manages only one cluster and 4 nodes. This is just due to the fact that I've only deployed this inside of a test environment, and that is the limitations of what we could provide for a test environment. You can also see the fact that it has 174 violations. It's managing 130. There's 138 images on this cluster, and there's 565 secrets. This dashboard itself, you can see the fact that there is it gives you a brief overview of the compliances that you meet. For example, the fact that the CIS Docker compliance, you have reached that 100%. You met those compliance rules 100%. But there are some things that you haven't met for the CIS Kubernetes compliance checklist. The rest of these compliance checklists are not applicable in our situation. Some of these are for hospitals and things like that, but it is also, it's good to have it. It just comes in house with it. So that's the dashboard feature. We'll go into the network graphs. So with the network graph, you can see the fact that it's split up into the cluster and the namespaces. Right now, my cluster is named remote. For some reason, I think it's just due to the fact that this is just the default name. And there's only one cluster that I can change this to. But for namespace wise, you can show the network traffic and network graph from a namespace view. So let's say, for example, if I chose the StackRox namespace, you can actually see the traffic of the of StackRox going in and out of different pods and such. So for example, you can see the fact that there is 2 ingress flows, that it's reaching this. Both of these traffics are connecting to UDP port 5353. And you kind of get more overview as well if you want to dig deeper. Another thing that's cool about this is that you can also, to a certain degree, have a network policy simulator, check the network policy simulator. And this kind of sets up a StackRox kind of, to a certain degree, tries to write rules that could kind of help you. If they see something kind of strange, it could kind of try to help you and generate some network policies for you. As of right now, it doesn't seem to find that there's anything wrong with how everything is set up, or if there's anything weird going on. So it hasn't created any network policies, but of course, this is just due to the fact that this is a trusted test environment. So I haven't had enough time to experiment more with this feature. Let me get rid of that. So these are the 173 violations that you have saw earlier. For example, this is one of the violations. You can also see that if there's any set policies that kind of covers it. This is kind of where the policies come in, and I'll kind of explain for that later. So you kind of set the policy, and it kind of more or less is set. Right now, it's not set into enforce mode. It's set into just notify mode. So if there is a set action on a cluster that goes against a policy, it will send a notification, and it will be shown here in the violations portion of StackRox. To the compliance guidelines, to the compliance section of StackRox, you can see the fact that it meets the CIS Docker compliance guidelines by 100%, but it doesn't pass the CIS K8 compliance guidelines. It don't completely. It's passed by 73%. But what you can do is go inside here and see what is going on. For example, it shows that right here. One of the things that is not set on this cluster is that it ensures the fact we didn't ensure the fact that the container network interface file ownership is set to root, and so on. And there's multiple other things that we probably didn't do, but I'm also talking with other people just to see the fact that is this just because this is a test environment, or is this something that we need to worry about later on? But it's just a great overview of what you can do better. And the beautiful thing about this is that you can export this file and save it as either a CSV or a PDF and give it out to people. So this is the vulnerability management section of StackRox. You can see the fact that there are 82 CVEs present in some of the images. If you click here, you can kind of see where their the CVS scores and where they kind of are in it. I've been having some trouble reading this, but it seems that this is the image right here that this particular CVE has been located in from the scanner. The scanner pod itself is scanning the image, and this is the particular image that has been located inside. And it gives you a lot more information on it. I'm not really an expert at this, but I'm learning to, through watching videos to gain a more, thorough outlook on how to read a lot of these charts. But another thing that I also want to talk about is that there is a way for you to check for more or less to gain role-based access control visibility, and to just see the configurations of just the user accounts on the cluster, what each user account's roles are on the cluster as well. So if you go to configuration management and you go into configurations, RBAC, role-based access control visibility, and configurations, what you can do is go inside here and you can see the different users and groups on the cluster, and also what roles do each user and group have. For example, this one right here, system authenticated, is on the remote cluster. This is a group in particular. It also shows that it's not a cluster. The cluster admin role is disabled, and the fact that it has been assigned 21 roles, and you can get more information of the different roles that has been set and the different permissions that has been set on the cluster itself. And of course, what you can do is a lot of this data, you can export this and give out to people or use it in any way, shape, or form. It's very versatile. This is from what I've been doing some more research on it. This is just, I guess, a risk view on the deployments. I'm guessing this is the central deployment, the deployment for central. But I have been, gaining more information. This software, this implementation has a lot of features that I'm not accustomed to at the moment. So I'm just going along with it. Another thing that you can do is create policies. Find it. Policy management. So you can create your own policies. Right now, I'm not going to go about creating my own policies. But what I can do is show you how policy scoping works. For example, this was one in-house one that came included with StackRox. It pretty much it alerts on deployments with images that have been scanned in 30 days. The rationale, as you can see, the rationale is like out-of-date scans may not identify most recent CVEs. And what you can do is actually edit this policy as well. So right now, this policy is only used on the deploy stage. trying to see if I can get this onto the runtime stage, but I don't know why it's set on a deploy stage, but I'll see later on. One beautiful part I want to talk about is actually the scoping. Why I think that StackRox is very interesting is that you can restrict this policy either with a inclusive scope and exclusive scope. For example, you can add this policy to only a certain amount of certain clusters to a certain cluster to a certain namespace. Or what you can do is pretty much say, hey, I want this on every cluster except for I'm on every cluster and every namespace except for this particular cluster and this particular namespace. And this just gives you just an overview of the system health of StackRox. I think that's actually about it that I have for you guys at the moment. Do you guys have any questions?
I have one question on the
Yeah.
the vulnerability management. You showed the CVEs which were accessed from the images which are in that cluster, right?
Yes.
Is that something which can be queryable, like from outside, with some request or something like that?
Could you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
So
you.
are you aware of any method to query those information out of the cluster? Is that something which we can get out of the cluster, like an export it, or
To export the CVE data,
Yeah.
which types? Yes, you can export those.
So do you know what formats they are as of now?
From what I've seen, actually, I can check real fast. It seems as though you can export that via a PDF file, but I will see the fact if you can also export it using CSV.
Okay, thank you.
Any other
I have a
questions?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not specifically about StackRox, but the deployment. I think you started by explaining that you would deploy this and operate first.
Yes.
But the cluster you were showing was a demo cluster, like a test cluster.
Yes.
My question is about the plans or status or next steps, and maybe can we access it at some point, or like?
So at the moment, we're having some trouble with deployment, only due to the fact that our test cluster is just not optimal for StackRox deployment because we are having some issues with persistent volume claims on our test cluster. I have been more or less, my job has been to manually audit the code. So to be upfront with you, there are three main ways to deploy StackRox on this cluster. There's the manual deployment way, where you have a script that actually deploys it using, utilizing OC, and to do it that way. There's a way to deploy it using Helm, and there is a operator, but the operator does very weird things in the background, which I'm not really aware of. Right now, we have gotten it working with the manual deployment, and it has been tested countless times. But we're also trying to get it so that we can just deploy it using Helm, just so that anyone, just so that for future processes we can kind of automate it better. Right now, my job is to, audit the code for the manual deployment while also researching how I can get the Helm version of it to work. And probably in the next coming weeks, I'm talking to some other people to try to test it out in different environments. That doesn't give us raises to give me the PV, the persistent volume issue. But are you asking me how, more or less, are you asking me where you can try it out at? Or are you asking me about if you could test out on a test cluster, or? What?
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah, selfish question on how can I try it? And I was thinking if you were going to deploy to smoke, maybe I could look at it at some point. I mean, not rush, but just
Mhm.
wondering when we can expect you to be available there or elsewhere in
So-
the grade first.
So my end goal for my internship, which will last another, honestly, until the end of August, not in the beginning of August. So, a kind of like a 6 weeks time frame. That is going to be my end goal for the end of my till the end of my internship. So
Oh.
you can expect that.
Okay.
The small cluster in that amount of time frame. But I can, if you would like to, I can reach out to my mentor and see if I can give you access to the test cluster.
No, that's perfectly fine. No,
Okay.
no rush. Thank you.
I had a question about CV scanning policies. So you show that can be configured at runtime, right? And
Mhm.
do you know how exactly you can configure that? Like, can you configure this scan on an event, for example, like happening in a pod or something like that?
So as I've seen, you can for at least the 30-day scan, you can configure it at build, you can configure it at deployment, and you can configure it for runtime scanning. I'm still messing around with it, so I can't really answer your question at the moment. But I will, I am, testing StackRox out even more. But I can, once I gain some more information about StackRox, I can reach back out to you.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. I guess that's it.
Thanks a lot. It was a really interesting presentation.
Thank you guys for having me. If you guys need anything, reach back out to me. I'm on here from, I don't know where you guys are in the world, but just reach out to me on Google Chats and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. Thanks, Trey.
All right.
So let's stop the recording.
There is another topic in the agenda, actually.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, but so this was quite a full of a demo, right? I thought maybe we should stop the recording, put this as a separate one. Let me start a recording.
Okay.
Let's see if it separates it out, because I think this would be helpful for Operate First as well, so we can probably share it with them.
Sure.
Let me stop it.